Hi, y'all. Welcome back to the BirthFit podcast. I was just choking. It's my freaking water right here. I'm Lindsey Matthews Cantu, your BirthFit founder and CEO. And my apologies for getting caught up in life. I opened an office with some amazing partners in New Braunfels, Texas, Dr. Bria and Dr. Matt Much. And we have been slammed at the office. So that's a good thing. But I've neglected the podcast for just over 2 weeks. Here I am finally, and I've got an awesome guest coming on today, Kristin Weitzel, and we're going to talk all things about women's health and biohacking. I know you love that. Before we dive in, I want to remind you that none of this is medical advice. Consult with your doctor, your healthcare practitioner, your whatever. Ideally, they're holistic, but consult with them because all of this is information. It is to enhance your knowledge base. And at the end of the day, I want you to make your own decisions based on your values out of love and not fear. And from your intuition, your own intuition and informed decisions, true informed decisions. So, yeah, use it as education. You're gathering information. That's what you're doing. Um, yeah. My goal with this podcast is to bring you freedom, bring you hope, bring you possibility, bring you an alternative lens, an alternative perspective, maybe. So that when you are at transitions and forks in the road in your life, that maybe you feel a bit more grounded, you feel a bit more at peace, and that in those scenarios, you are able to make those decisions, those tough decisions. So, yeah, I hope you will find everything you're looking for in life. And I hope some of this podcast helps out. I hope we can deliver all we can, all the hope, possibility, and freedom throughout preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum for you, and even parenting and beyond. So, Kristin, I think, is coming on in just a few seconds, maybe minute. um, but yeah, I will be doing a preconception podcast real soon. It might be up next because, as some of you know, my husband and I will be open to conception in the near future. And I've spent the last 2 years really nourishing my soul and my body. And I don't believe there's a one size fits all preconception plan for everybody. But I do think there are some guidelines that everybody should kind of like be aware of. And everybody should do some digging, do some personal development digging, some homework. Get level up. That's like the best analogy or phrases I can give. I don't know what my hair is doing right now. Sorry for those of you that are watching on YouTube. Anyways, anyways, a newsletter went out today. If you aren't on the BirthFit newsletter, get on it. If you have questions about preconception that maybe you want me to answer in that podcast, and you hear this, email us info@birthfit.com prior to April 22nd or April 23rd. All right. Let me let Kristin in. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can. How are you doing?
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your patience.
Oh, yeah.
I was running a training. I was hoping to get on with you earlier, but we're
It
here
happens.
now. That's all that matters.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Welcome. Where are you at right now? Where are you located?
I'm in East Austin.
Okay, so you're not traveling.
No, thank goodness. Like a little breather from traveling is like
Yeah.
what I needed. So right now I'm not traveling. No.
Okay. Well, introduce yourself. Let the world
Yes.
know, or let the BirthFit community know who you are and what gifts you bring to the world.
Gosh, such a good community, the BirthFit community. I um I am Kristin Weitzel, and I run a business called Warrior Woman Mode, and I am also a founder of Sherpa Breath and Cold, which is a breath and cold experience slash instructor training. And I work very diligently to transform human beings,
Mm,
many women, from the edge of burnout to really higher performance and de-stressing them and feeling like the warriors that they really are.
mm,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. How did you get started doing what you do? Like, where do you see forks in the road in your journey that led you here or pivotal moments?
I did. I was a dancer. I grew up as a dancer. And I think spinning around the world of dance back then, ballerina style, really
Mm,
gave me this curiosity around how can I eat food? Back then, there was a lot of body dysmorphia, lots of other things going on. So, how can I have food in general? But how can I have food that's nutritive and is actually going to make me have energy and
yeah,
and keep my physique the same way? Right. I saw that there was, and I saw it, not only saw it, but went through a little bit of like body dysmorphia because like ballerinas and what you need to look like and how the prima ballerinas looked and things like that. So I saw that
yeah,
kind of running rampant in the community. I saw also what was going on and still continues to happen in socialization, which is like, we're judged by how we look and it's all about getting smaller and skinnier and all of that stuff. And that unfortunately still pervades a lot of the female mindset today, something that I'm
mhm,
working really diligently to try to change. And I got curious around that. And so that wove me into sort of food and fitness and
okay,
trying all these different eating lifestyles and working to understand what my physiology liked and didn't like when it came to food, like sensitivities or allergies, or trying paleo, trying veganism, trying. I say trying because like many times I was not succeeding. And so exploring all of the eating lifestyle choices that existed that I could find, and that led me to Mark Sisson, godfather of primal paleo diet.
yeah,
That led me to more what you would call nowadays biohacking, Dave Asprey, that whole community that of bulletproof eaters and biohackers and all that. Quite often I get sort of crowned as one of the like, oh, Kristen, she's like one of the top female biohackers. And sometimes I think that's great. And sometimes I'm like, maybe that's not such a great term territory to be in. But I adopted the word. I like the word because it was always biohacking has always been, it feels unapproachable to females.
Well, I'm glad you touched on that because I was gonna ask you about, like, okay, what is biohacking? Because some people don't even like, they see the word and they're like, the other way, you know?
Yeah, because
And
it feels a little like,
yeah,
oh, risky or something.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, biohacking is using, and my definition of it is just using ancient practices coupled with modern technology and innovation to be
mm,
able to change the environment inside and outside of our bodies in order to live longer, better, and happier. Uh,
mm,
that could be science, and that could be breath work, and that could be
yeah,
meditation. And for many people who are like, oh, biohacking, I don't want to do that.
yeah,
It's like you probably already are. You're taking a cold shower, or you're doing some breath work, or it just is, in the beginning, it was like so many. I use the word dude sweetly. It's like so many, it's like bro energy that was like, I'm gonna put red light on my testicles and inject things and cryotherapy until I'm frozen to death. And that's just,
yeah,
that just felt like a lot of risk. And we tend to be a little more risk averse as females, just genetically and
yeah,
biochemically, as we should, right? We're rearing kids, we're taking care of communities, we're taking
yeah,
a bit more of the landscape in and making our decisions based on, the tribe, as it were. And so good on us for not putting red light on our testicles the minute it came out or whatever. And like the onset of it coming out of tech, right? A lot of tech, a lot of San Francisco sort of tech culture, Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
biohacking, you know, like
Yeah.
felt edgy.
Yeah.
Not edgy, ladies and gentlemen. It's fun and it can be edgy, but it's not generally speaking edgy or dangerous.
Yeah, so you would put everything in there from, like, cold showers to red light therapy
Yeah.
to butter in your coffee.
Butter in my coffee.
Awesome.
All of that. Yeah. And I think some people might not
Yeah.
feel like biohacking is only like the cutting edge, but
Yeah.
really trying to adjust the environment in and out of our bodies, like ancient practices, and the science is always changing, then why shouldn't we be able to apply the science in real time best we can and
Mhm.
make those shifts, you know? I think
Mhm.
it's yeah, I think it's a beautiful opportunity. All we're really doing is optimizing our well-being, right? And
Mm.
that
Yeah.
that there's a big fork in the road because I don't have to tell you this, but the fork in the road is that a lot of the research is around men, and a lot of the
Yeah.
practices are around male physiology. When we're going to talk about men and women today, I literally mean physiologically, genetically. So that it's
Yeah.
like male bodies in space have propensities to do certain things, female bodies with respect to all genders non-binary. When we're dealing with the female physiology, we haven't shown up in the research. We haven't been
Mhm.
studied well. There are a lot of like, you should do this. And then
Yeah.
protocols that are designed for males that are nobody was trying to harm anybody, but they're just not as good
Totally.
for us. And we're doing them because that was generally recognized as safe for men. So I guess women are like men.
Yeah. So what's coming to your mind right now? Because I was gonna ask you about fasting. Like, that would be the first question, intermittent fasting.
So rad. Such a good question. So many people into intermittent fasting and fasting in general. There's I'm a conservative. I'm conservative on fasting. If I'm conservative on fasting. The women I work with, a predominant part of my business is working with females one-on-one or in group settings to work in 8 different areas of their life. And in the nutrition piece of this, warrior woman mode, nutrition mode, we talk about fasting. And
Awesome.
I am a big, I think intermittent fasting is excellent and um, can be utilized with a
Mhm.
very high level of success. I think for women, um, part of like Dave Asprey's book, Fast This Way, talks a bit about this, which was really nice to see this in his book. That for women, it's like maybe every other day, great. And longer term fasts can be excellent too, but just knowing when really makes a good impact on the best impact on the system with the least bit of conflict to our physiology. And someone
Mhm.
like Dr. Mindy Pelz, who talks a lot about fasting and also menopause, um, you know, she's pulled a lot of research and done a lot of the work. So it's always standing on the shoulders of giants. But we really
Yeah.
look and see that during your period, if you still have your period, the first, 4 or 5 days or whatever it is of your cycle, that's the best time to fast. And we have less of an appetite, typically less cravings going on.
Mhm.
We are about to have this like rise in estrogen that happen, and we are I say this to women, and it's like, of course, we're not like men in those moments, but our hormonal profile is a little bit more like a male in that moment, or just it's a low hormone phase in the sense of we can fast a little bit longer, a little bit more deeply, or our long term fasts are great during that
Mm.
time period. But I also want to say this thing, which, I watch all your coffee talks, so I know that you're very much aligned with this. I love your coffee talks. Um, this is something about recognizing your intuition as a woman and knowing what feels
Mm.
good. And some women maybe be like, I'm on my period. I don't want to fast right now. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Making a sovereign decision based on how your body feels and what other conditions are going on.
Yeah, it seems like the cycle definitely affects or influences the best time of when to fast.
Yeah.
Maybe the luteal phase might not be
Yeah, totally.
smooth sailing.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like it doesn't mean you can't fast at other times. You can fast kind of when it feels right in some regard. And
Mm.
also when I'm working with women, I'm like, yo, you want to jump in and fast in those first 5 days? Great. Pick other times you may want to fast or cycle intermittent fasting. And really like the 5 days or the last week, let's like stay off the fasting train because we're gonna have already have cravings, we're having a shift in our blood plasma, all
Mm.
these things are happening in our body. and maybe we're having some more emotionality.
Yeah.
So like adding fuel to that fire by potentially feeling like you're hungry, or the shoulds or the restriction comes up, right? And then we have
Yeah.
this thing where we are like beating ourselves up on top of beating ourselves up. um,
Yeah.
Tend to see more in women than men. Doesn't mean it's always that way. Then it's a nice time to kind of feel into eating
Yeah.
well and taking care of ourselves and self care
Mm,
and all that.
awesome. Is
Yeah.
there another subject that came to mind when you were saying, um, you know, there's definitely more research out there on males than females, and you should do this because this is what the research says.
Yeah, I the more I dig in, the more I learn. You know, fitness is like always comes to
Mm.
mind. I don't know how I became. Someone's like, "Oh, this is Kristin. She's like the day one bleed girl." It's like, wait, what? But and I'm like, what is that? But so the backstory on that quickly is that I was in Los Angeles, living there for quite a number of years, and went to go speak on nutrition. It was like, drop the shame around food. It was like a presentation in a fancy boutique fitness studio there, and
Mm.
in LA proper, and there were 100 people in the room, probably 95 women and 5 men, and we were talking all about food and like how to use it as fuel and how to, not carry negative self-talk around restriction and all of that. And I asked, and also fitness, like really about using it. I was brought in to be like, talk about food as fuel. What do we got to do to fuel ourselves to make more muscles? And so I just off the cuff said, well, everybody, you guys all know in this room, like there's a 8 to 10 day window of the cycle. It's probably closer to like a week, 7, 8 days, depending. Everyone's cycle length is different. You know that you can build more muscle. You have propensity, possibility to build more muscle during this time of your cycle. And then everyone was blank stares. And I hadn't learned it that many years ago, but I just felt like I was late to the bandwagon on that. And
Yeah.
I'm in LA and there's 95 people in here and not one woman is raising their hand. So I said, hey, let's just back up. Let's like, maybe
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
confusing. Who in here knows what day of their cycle it is right now? And it was like 12 hands went up. And I
Wow.
mean, especially like BirthFit community, it's not about judgment. It's just like women, these are our bodies and they're
Yeah.
doing things. And I want for all of us to know where we're at. And there's so much technology and great apps these days. And so then I had to kind of back out a little further,
Mhm.
say there's apps, we can track it. I'm on day 12. This is what it means right now. And somebody asked the question like, well, how do I know what day it is? And great question, right? If you don't know,
Yeah.
you don't know. So then I said, well, the day one of your period is the first day of your cycle is day one. So like day one bleed is day one. Day one bleed is day one. And they're like, day one bleed girl.
The nickname stuck.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting? And did you find it interesting too? Like I think that was chosen by men because I would like to think of my period as sort of the end of my cycle,
Yeah. Yeah.
shedding and then about to be I want day one to be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm
Coming
heading back
out.
to ovulation shortly, or whatever. But I think that was like designed by men, right? Because they're like, oh, the blood will tell us when day one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy tracking there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So the
Well,
fitness piece is the answer to your question, that there's some
okay.
key components around training that I wholeheartedly believe in, that I've seen success using. And yeah, like periodization, no pun intended, but periodization has been planned forever around training males. And it works. It
Yeah.
works for women too, but it can be done more effectively by aligning with our cycle,
Yeah.
um, or menopausally, like figuring things out, testing, and, just also understanding when we do get to the next segment of our life, menopause,
Yeah.
that we can train in different ways.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's okay. I want to jump into fitness, but I'm glad you mentioned that about your talk with like, you know, majority of the audience not knowing when their cycle was, because it's interesting. I was just sharing before you got on of why I've slacked on the podcast the last 2 weeks. Because I opened an office in New Braunfels, Texas,
Mhm.
and we've been slammed. And I've been doing a ton of preconception consults, and it's so wild, Kristen. I've had women that have come in that have had trouble getting pregnant, and they're, venturing down the assisted reproductive technology route like IUI or IVF,
Mm-hmm.
and they're, about to spend $10,000 on IVF, and yet they don't know what day they ovulate or, how their progesterone's doing or, like just kind of like cervical fluid, basics of a cycle.
Yeah.
And, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's always a question that I ask on intakes is like, okay, tell me about your cycle. How long is it? How many days do you bleed? And where are you at right now? And they're like, well, I just finished, or, maybe I'm like 32 days, I don't know. Like, do you use anything to track it? And so I think, like, yeah, like you said, like, let's back up, and I think we just need to teach women and teenagers and young women the basics. I think our freaking society has failed at that.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
wish that I was tracking in a more tightly wound way. I didn't really
Oh,
start tracking and paying attention till I was like 30.
mhm.
That feels like, wait, what? And now
Same. Yeah.
I'm like, tell everyone, call
Yeah.
the boards, tell everyone. Yeah, because it's important. And it's training age too. Like your training years. Like I feel like I left a lot on the table
Yeah.
with like, not utilizing my estrogen to my max capacity for years. And then also
Yeah.
cortisol crushing myself, cardio crushing myself, like just in ways that my body was like, stop. And I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna do what everyone else is doing. This 25-year-old man can do it, so
Yeah.
can I.
Yeah. I think like you nailed it when you said, I'm just going to do what everybody else is doing. And I think so many women do that. And then they reach their breaking point, where their adrenals crash or some sort of autoimmune something hits them.
Mm,
Yeah. And it's just like, okay, now we're forced to stop and slow down and figure shit out.
yeah. Yeah, and I think you and I connected over there was an article, right, that someone
Oh, yes.
I mean, we connected before. We have all like this
But
crossover
this is a
where,
good question.
but
This
yeah.
is a good question to segue into fitness because I think the article I sent you was, and this has been a great topic in the BirthFit community for a minute is, the Whoop recommendations on training. And they did an article, and I think they quoted Stacy Sims, who, I love most of her stuff, like 80% of her stuff. Um, and I went back and listened to the podcast, and the podcast was definitely better. But, they were talking about, pushing yourself with training during, menstruation, and then I have the whole BirthFit, group going, "Is this right? What's going on here?" It's like, well, listen to your gut, listen to your intuition overall. If you feel good, train. If you don't,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, and
like,
it's so
what are your
hard,
thoughts
right?
there?
Because we're so different. Number one, like I love Stacey Sims. A lot of the research and a lot of the insight
Yeah.
from her comes from her. But she's not the only game. She's up there with one of the first to really talk
Oh,
about it though.
totally,
Like she's
totally.
groundbreaking.
And I
And
love her quote, "Women are not small men."
yeah, yeah. And the other thing that always reminds me of is I went to a job interview for Under Armour years ago, and the guy said, "We're trying to hire a woman for this women's division." I worked in consumer packaged goods and marketing and brand marketing. Trying to hire a female for the women's division. Well, that's their first clue. Maybe that's a good choice. And then he said, "We realize we can't just shrink it and pink it anymore."
Oh
And
my
so what
god.
they would do is they would take the men's line and they would like they just shrink the measurements proportionally and make it pink or a girly
Yeah.
color. And so I was like, "Oh, we can't just shrink it and pink it
Drink
anymore."
it and
It's just
pink
like
it.
my favorite, like, because it's like it's not about that. You can't
Yeah,
put something in a container that's for men and just say, "We'll make it smaller" or whatever.
yeah.
And so no slight on Under Armour in some way because they were trying to change the story. I'm sure they've changed it by now.
They were trying.
Yeah, yeah. And it was like, "Okay, buddy, we're not just gonna shrink and pink it. We're gonna get a woman to run the women's division." Um, of clothing for women, right? And so, but Stacey, I love, and my opinion on here's where I think the challenge comes into like the communication and the community, and like I always also wondered like who in tandem at Whoop wrote the article after watching the podcast. And
Yeah.
again, like I'm always, I kind of don't give a shit about cancel culture, but I also am like sensitive enough to know that, like, let's say it was a man, and I'm sure that person's doing the best job they can, but the translation of that podcast, because the podcast is a little bit more clear, is
Yeah. What's
communicating. Whoop is a huge platform. So there's a responsibility for Whoop to communicate in a way that's like not having women come back to you maybe and saying, wait, what? Because what
Yeah.
it sounded like was full speed ahead. You got your period, day one bleed, hit the weight,
Artists.
hard as you can.
Yeah.
And I think what Stacey is trying to say is there's a misnomer for a long time, or there is a stigma, or there is a general consensus of, I have my period, so I should like stay home, and I shouldn't go upside down, and I shouldn't do gym, and I shouldn't lift things, and I'm tender and sensitive, and I'm bleeding, and
Just
it's like
sit on
it's
the
almost
couch all day.
shame. Yeah, and it's almost like shame. It's got a little shame on it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think what Stacey's trying to say is that's recognize what might be societal, recognize what might be like communal, in the sense that if all of your female friends are bitching about, oh, I got my period and this is awful, like, or your mom, forget your friends, even ancestrally, like your mom and your grandmother or
Yeah.
whoever, like, oh, I can hardly wait till my period's done. Like, I've heard women say that, and I'm always like, give me yours. Because for me, I get my period and I think, okay, my body's functioning well. I'm on my normal cycle. It's not too far
Totally.
off. I feel like I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Everything's going on with my hormones, and it's a really good marker of wellness.
Yeah.
And so I am always like celebrating it, and I love. I have mom friends now. My daughter, it's their period. They're like celebrating and doing a party on the beach or doing whatever, and it's because it's like coming into womanhood in a different way than I did. My mother was certainly open about me getting my period, but I got my period and I was very, even back then, I was like independent and stubborn and a little alpha. And I got my period and I was like, I'm going to figure it out with the pads that mom has, and I'm not going to tell her. I'm going to be like so cool about having my period. I'm not going to tell her for like the first couple months. And
Yeah.
when I finally acted like sort of all cool, like, yeah, I got my period. Can you imagine as a mom? You're like, this is a big milestone. I love you. Why didn't you tell me? And of course, that's what my mom said. And I was like, nah, it's nothing, no big deal. And it was just like, the reality is I was like shamed about it. I wanted to be like tomboy playing outside, doing all the
Yeah.
things. And I was embarrassed that I had to wear a big pad. And so it's just like, I love when that doesn't happen now. Right.
Yeah.
And going back to the Whoop article, somebody writing that article being a little bit
Just
general, a
ignorant.
little too
Yeah.
general, made us all feel like, oh, we should just like go hard with leaving. Like, how often do you see this? We leave entirely off the table intuition, right?
Mhm.
Sensitivity. It's like you're either here or there, it's black or white. We're all so different. And this is like for men
Mhm.
and women, even, we're all N of one experiments, but
Yeah.
see it off the table a lot. When to work out, when to not work out, how we feel. It's like, this is what you should do, right?
Mhm.
I love Jolene Brighton. I love
Yeah.
um, Elisa Viti. I
Yeah.
never say her last name right. I always get her on Viti, I think it is. And I do think also like they have some anecdotal evidence that's interesting and commentary and opinions that's interesting, but I don't think, I'm not like, I have to, these 6 days of the cycle, I have to have cruciferous vegetables. It's a must. It's like,
Yeah.
this is the time that I'm going to look. When we're ovulating, we're in our red high heels and our lipstick, and we're out and we're extroverted probably, and we want to negotiate big business deals, and we want to have all the sex or whatever. So there's like, yes, I get it. And maybe someone's like ovulating being like, I've had a really hard 2 weeks. I need to rest.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's just like
Totally.
that open-endedness of it, the
Yeah.
sweetness is a little bit missing from the telling us what to do. And I'm sure I've fallen prey to that in some ways, trying to do what Stacey does, which is course correct society's generalization by saying, hey,
Yeah.
you don't have to be in a bath for 5 days when you get your period, or like go hide in the red tent. That's like,
Yeah.
you can go out in the world and do things if you want to and as you want to. And I do like training. I don't have a lot of symptomatic stuff going on around PMS or my period, so
Mm.
I do love to train. Um, Typically not day one, kind of like
Yeah.
chilling low key on
Yeah.
day one, but then I like to train. I like to I'm the weirdo in the gym that's like day 7, and I'm like, the music's always loud, so no one really hears me, but I'm like, estrogen, let's go, like cheering on the estrogen count.
So
And the
how do you train? What does your training look like right now?
Well, I just finished 12 weeks of ARX, which
Oh,
is adaptive resistance exercise. So it's an abnormal 12 weeks. I'll tell you really as briefly as I can. I'll be brief. What my training might look like, and then what I just did, because it is an interesting correlation. So
okay.
I don't want to say the device doesn't matter. ARX is adaptive resistance exercise. It is a machine that focuses on eccentric load. And
Mm,
it 15 times a second, as you are pushing against the machine or pulling or whatever you might be doing, you're doing positives and negatives on the machine, but it is like on the eccentric load specifically, where it's harder for us to sometimes get this in the gym because we have gravity and we have different things going on.
yeah.
100% of the eccentric load, it is resisting what you push and a little bit more. So it's
Wow.
checking in like 15 times a second how hard you're pushing, and it's pushing back at that fractional rate plus a little bit more. So it's you always fail, basically. It's like, okay, I'm always failing, but that's like the point. And so
Yeah.
you get on this machine, which looks like maybe some kind of other big machine at the gym, more like it's more like a pulley system than a free weight type of thing, because it's
Got
very
it.
safe. And the interesting part about being a female and doing it is, the theory being eccentric load, you can do it once a week instead of having to go to the gym 5 times a week. You're going to build more muscle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I take my tests tomorrow, so I could share with you what kind of muscle building that happened, because
Yeah.
I'm like a 5-day-a-week trainer. That's what I'm used to, or more. And so this was like, I'm going to go down. I did 2 days a week. And even that is incorrect, because what I did was I cycled my entire 12-week program with the ARX according to and aligned with my menstrual cycle and
Okay.
my crazy travel schedule. So I basically said, okay, I ended up taking only 2 spin classes the entire 12 weeks. I did no other cardio. I did only ARX, and I did not touch a
Wow.
gym, a weight, or anything. It was really interesting for me because I was like,
Whoa.
I was going to have a lot of extra time, and then what do? You just work. And so, but so I did this thing where I did during the 10-day period of my, let's say like day 6 to 16, I did
Mm-hmm.
3 sessions on ARX. So 3 really big, I called them my big day or my heavy eccentric day. And it was like an hour-long workout on that machine while I had estrogen on my side, little spikes of T, all the things that are going on. When I started to fall off in week 3, I might have done one more full big day. And then on the luteal phase last week, 10 days, I did positives only. So I did the easier workout, 20 minutes or less in and out on the machine. And I did it twice a week, sometimes once a week. So I
Okay.
like cycled all of the heavy work. Maximum effort is what I call it when I work with women one-on-one. We're going to do a week
Yeah.
of maximum effort. Let's align it with our 6 to 16, somewhere in that framework of our cycle, and let's see how it feels. And
Mm.
so I did this around the ARX, and before the ARX, I did this, and we'll do this in a style that is my biggest workout days are in that 10-day window. And by biggest workout days, I mean I do less cardio, less mobility, probably not less steady state, but probably a little less steady state than normal. And I push hard. I do max lifts. I do the biggest weight and the most pushes, even if I'm like, Prilip and chart style, just like doing 6 to 8 reps of the big weights and then doing progressive overload to fail, like close as I can to failure if I'm in a
Cool.
gym. So
Yeah.
I'm doing that in those 10 days. And like in LA, I'll never forget, somebody said, hey, are you saying that like those are the only 10 days I have to work out? I was like, great question. If you had
Well,
to pick 10 days that were your only days, probably those are the
mhm,
days, you know?
mhm.
And also if this was true for men, we would definitely have, the Deuce Fitness workout mania man 10-day fire program or something,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Like
Yeah.
there would be, celebrities at 2 a.m. talking about it. There would be, and it's again not a slight on men, but if this was true for men would have developed programs around maximum effort, 10 days
Yeah.
of doing training.
Only 10 days of your cycle. That's all you gotta do.
So, I mean, I save the other stuff for around then, right? I'm always strength training, and outside of the ARX protocol, which was fascinating. The only other thing I did was ice baths around it, and never more than twice a week. One ice bath to potentiate the workout and one ice bath on a rest day. But outside of that, when I'm training with regular gym equipment, it's like those are the days I go hard. 10 days. I'll usually take a rest day when it feels right. I'm always like, I'm only going to take one rest day. And then I usually take 2 in 10 days because I go hard enough. And the rest of the time, I'm working on accessory movement. I'm still strength training. I may not be going max load. I may treat my last week of the cycle like a deload week. And all of that is really not only with my body, but the women I'm working it with enough now that let's be clear. It's like you have to learn the scaffolding and then you have to put it over align it with your cycle. It takes a minute, it takes some time. But by the time you nail that, the women that nail that, they just see change faster. They just feel better. The maximum effort week aligned over the 7 days within that 10-day window. And women are like, because they're going right through your ovulation. You're like, yes, I just did this. They're like texting, they're checking in, they're on fire. They're like, why did I feel so good right now? Why do I feel so strong right now? It's just so beautiful to see. And it's like, I want to get them all in a room together to say, oh my God, I feel all these things. And oh my God, I took my workload down the last 5 days before my period. And I did a lot more self-care, down regulation, mobility, like easeful work, yoga, gentle, like care. And they're like, why do I feel so good? Why are my PMS symptoms not so strong? And I want to get everyone in a room together and say, talk to each other because it's beautiful. It's like, and I this sounds crazy. I wonder if this happens to you. When I have people that I'm working with, I'm like, oh, she's ovulating. Because I can tell when they text me the emojis, look, I'm not taking blood tests on these people, but I can feel in their energy of their voice notes and how they are. I'm like, oh, this chick is ovulating right now. And it's like, it's not a skill. It's just, if you look at the bigger picture of women, you can see these patterns emerge.
It's so true. Like, I'll probably respond to text in my luteal phase, like one word. No emojis.
Totally.
Yeah,
and I feel like women are also heightened positivity, which I notice this. And again, like, I'm not pulling up a study from 1986 that's like a double-blind placebo, but I notice it a lot that like women are just like less negative self-talk as we go through that mid-cycle ovulation, all of that. It's just like really beautiful to see that if we can harmonize with all those things, then we can feel better and like be graceful with ourselves.
Yeah. Okay, so with your clients, you do strength training, nutrition, breath work, cold plunges,
Meditation.
meditation.
It's like, so the cool, this is a great question. People are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm an aggregator. I spent 15 years and plus all my corporate years, like as my passion project while I was doing another job in consumer packaged goods. I spent all these years taking all these certifications and being like, how can I get to like master breathwork teacher? And how can I learn about women's physiology? And then couple that with the curiosity I built from being like all the food things I went through. I'm the girl that writes info app that Patrick McEwen shows up, who's this beautiful guy with Oxygen Advantage and teaches athletes how to breathe. But he's like a bit introverted, not a bit, he's introverted. He was on my podcast last week and he's like, I am introverted and introverts can be powerful too. So he's super introverted, but he shows up at a course I'm taking for the weekend and the poor guy's just trying to eat lunch on his own. And I'm like, I'm sitting with you for lunch. I got 40 questions. I read a TMJ study about women in breathing. And can you send me your copy of it? And what's going on? And and he's like, I love you. And this is intense for me, Kristin. But graciously, he's always been in my life since because he answers my emails and he's so wonderful because he knows I'm just hungry for knowledge about breathing and women and fitness and women and food and women. And it's ironic that I've learned so much of this in the early days from men because that's who was researching it. And especially Patrick's always like, I feel like, am I allowed to be the mouthpiece to talk about women, but no one else is pulling the research and writing about it?
No, and his book is great. So let's dive into some breath work. How does that show up in when you're coaching women and like does it show up at certain times of menstrual cycle or do you alter it at different times? How does it show up for you?
It shows up. So I work all the one-on-one I do what I do is pretty custom, right? It's like people will say, you're my biohacking coach. And then it's like, I'm programming fitness if they don't know and they need it. I'm programming food, and I'll do it all if they want, or I'll do less, or, we just, like, I have a
Yeah.
UFC fighter who's incredible, and she only needs me for like 3 things. She's like, I don't need the rest. I got 9 other coaches. You can go away for those things. With these 3 things, we're going to do these other things. So that's great, right? I can customize in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But what I see with breathing specifically, number one, in my opinion, outside of sleep, it is the most important thing for us to get right. And this
Yeah.
isn't about good or bad, so much so, but there is a correct and a better biomechanically solid way to breathe. And I also notice in the cold, in the heat, because will do ice and sauna with women, and just generally speaking with workouts, there's a lot of like, I am day 10 through 22 is what the research mostly says, but it's like we are starting to lose the capacity to uptake oxygen. So we have less CO2, and during this time of the month, there's like less ability to take in CO2. And so that makes us uptake oxygen less, right? There's like
Mm.
a dirty science lecture in the middle of there. It's an oversimplification of what I just said, but it's like we need
Yeah. Why do
CO2.
you think that is? Just hormones?
Progesterone hormones. Yeah, yeah. It's like reproductive years females that the studies are done on, progesterone and the way that the body's responding to it. And so we have a few other things going on. We're generally smaller, et cetera, et cetera. So there are definite differences. And the wild thing, like, and Patrick talks a lot about this, is that because we are have a less of a capacity to uptake oxygen through the CO2, I don't even want to call it a deficit. It's just what happens to our beautiful bodies during
Yeah.
our cycle. We can uptake less oxygen. Because of that, that's the days that are leading up to sort of our last week before our period. And what we do to make up for that, our body's a beautiful regulating machine. It's going to regulate breath and try to regulate your oxygen ratios and what you need. And so we overbreathe. We tend to overbreathe as women. So we're overbreathing, which means mouth breathing, which means upper chest breathing, which means overbreathing, which means we are less grounded and attached to our pelvic floor. And that when we are less grounded and attached to our pelvic floor and we're overbreathing, we become more pain sensitive. We become less tolerant of temperature. A lot of things happen to the body. And then the theory is, could it be that a portion of, certainly I'm not trying to tell women it's all breathing, but a portion of our PMS and a portion of some of the things that are happening to us and that week before the period are really actually caused by this overbreathing that occurs the 10 days before we get to that last week of the cycle. And
Yeah,
so
or
it's
breathwork
really
would just
interesting.
influence it to be a little bit more bearable.
Yeah, which is like really interesting. So the note that you're making is quite true. And what I have women work on is more carbon dioxide tolerance training, right? Breathe light to breathe
Mhm.
light, secret breathing, maximal breath holds, and just really playing with that, like the apneas in a way that feels like they get more comfortable with less CO2, which means maybe we can regulate our breathing. And just generally speaking, teaching women how to nasal breathe and say, this is the best way to breathe
Yeah.
helps. That really
Yeah.
helps. And again, it's like, so there's other issues that go on. People have endometriosis, other challenges that are pain and
Yeah.
all of these things correlated. Postpartum, there's a lot of other things going on there. But one of the big pieces of this, the tools that we have, is to understand how we can use the breath to really,
Mhm.
lock in and get grounded and expand our bellies and um, align with our pelvic floor in some way. And
Yeah.
so I'm certainly not a pelvic floor specialist in any way, shape, or form, but I do know that when I am grounding myself, de-stressing myself, down regulating my breathing, and concentrating on what's going on the elevator, I was called the elevator of the pelvic
Yes.
floor, what's going on in the elevator while I'm breathing, because our diaphragm is this beautiful muscle and it's connected to the pelvic floor, right? So how does it work
Yeah,
when I'm,
they work together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Mm.
so it's, I'm always also fascinated, and this is like my question to you, is that people will ask me as a breathwork, like I do this a lot of breathwork everywhere, and I haven't had kids, and people will be like, "Oh, this is like Lamaze," or like, "What's the deal in Lamaze? Was that just debunked? That's like people don't do that anymore. It's like
No,
gone."
it was a birth education course,
Mm-hmm.
um, and since then, others have come out. So there's like Lamaze, and then there's Bradley method, hypnobirthing, birthing from within, and they all came about at different times.
Mm.
Um, and I
I
think
think
we're
people
in
just think Lamaze is like a breathing style where people are like,
yeah. That,
We're
yeah.
not really-
Yes. But it
I'm
was
like,
one of the first
oh,
birth education courses, which is wild, but I don't know how effective it was if you're, like, hyperventilating.
I know. That would be my take, would be like, is this making this worse? But like, good
Yeah.
someone, Mr. or Miss Lamas, who came to say, hey, maybe this could work. At least let's think
Yeah,
about it. That's at least like
yeah.
the
"Oh,
starting
you're not
of the
doing it
process.
right."
Yeah. Now we have BIRTHFIT, so we're all saved and it's great. But yeah, like it's amazing. People will ask me that, and I just didn't quite understand. I never want to like knock someone and be like the
Yeah.
validity here is not so whatever. It doesn't seem right, but I don't know I certainly didn't take the course.
Well, it's
Um,
interesting. Breathwork, like you said, it grounds people, puts them in their body. And so
mhm.
much of our programs include breath work because I think that's the first, like, I'm sure as you see, it's one of the first tools you can sort of access with women. And
Yeah.
then on the postpartum side, bringing them back into their body,
Mhm.
because their whole like neurobiomechanics have been altered because you got a baby that restricts the diaphragm range of motion, and so you become a shallow breather just whether
Yeah.
you want to or not.
Sure. For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm so glad to hear this on breath work, and that you include it in certain like, influencing your cycle with it is, like I hope people hear this and take it and run
Yeah.
with it because that's huge.
Yeah. And I put up a reels today. I'm doing a breathwork workshop online on Sunday, and I put up a reels just like
Ooh,
really looked into the research. It's like a reminder also that as women, based on a lot of it is neurochemistry, but we're twice as susceptible to depression and twice as
mm,
susceptible to anxiety and like high anxiety states, and that some of the literature is like just suggesting that we are more it's not about malleability, it's more like susceptible to outside forces controlling how we're feeling and how our nervous system is responding just by like
yeah,
mirror neurons and whatnot, that we're just more than men. And
mm,
because of that, it's like another piece of why breath is so important, because we need to work to down regulate a little bit more and keep like the eye on the prize and the focus.
yeah,
This is why I love to put women in ice. I love to put everyone in ice, including myself, but I love to put women in ice because it is a microcosm of like a big stress hit, right? I know that you have
mm.
a freezer in your backyard and you're all getting after
Yeah,
it.
this was the last, like, 3rd t big topic I wanted to cover with you was cold
Yeah.
plunge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, talk to me about the microcosm.
Yeah. It's like a microcosm of our lives. Like I say,
Mm.
a lot of times I'm like, we don't get in the ice to get good at ice baths. We get in the ice to get good at life. Like that's
So
it, right?
true. Yeah.
That's I'm always like, no one really wants to be in there. Like I kind of want to be
No.
in there. I love it, but I've just like grown to love it in a way that's ridiculous. It's like why I spend so much time around colds and do cold
Ah,
exposure. But it's number one, women get to choose if they want to go in or they don't want to go in. But I also like to suggest but there's a couple other things at play, right? There's this risk aversion, and there is like, I don't think that's good for me. I never liked the cold thing. The Handel group, which is a great coaching group a long, long time ago in the yoga world, et cetera, that I like a leadership coaching, talked a lot about the chicken and the brat. So I always tell people with challenging things that sometimes we go, okay, getting thing. There's a chicken over here, and there's a brat over here on this shoulder, and it's like, who's at play? Is it really intuition, which is great? Is it this happens with food and women as well, as they're like learning to maybe shift out of some less healthy options and into some more healthy options? Do we want the whole box of cookies because we feel like intuitively we need it, or the getting in the ice bath we're like very resistant intuitively because we don't feel like it's a good idea because our allostatic stress load or cortisol or something is all crazy cool? um, or is it the chicken or is it the brat? And the chicken is the part of us that's like, I'm a little afraid and I'm smart enough to know how to get out of this, so I'm just not going to do it. And then the brat is the part of us that's like, I don't want it because I don't have to, because I had a long day and it was hard and I deserve a cookie and I'm not getting in the ice because everyone says it's good for me, but it's probably really not. And like that,
Yeah,
those parts of us, they live in us. They like live in us, and we have to
absolutely.
navigate and negotiate, and that's cool. But for anyone who's listening, especially females, because we're slightly more risk averse, generally speaking, the cold is a game changer. And, I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't say a lot of the things I want to say definitively. I'm not going to use the word cure, but especially there's another woman that I know that does cold coaching. I've put over 2,000 bodies in the ice myself. And anecdotally, what we see is people make their own sovereign decisions to get in cold, and women specifically with autoimmune conditions on the rise, with mood, challenging depression and mood and anxiety coming out of quarantine on the rise, and with women wanting to recomposition their bodies. It's always a thing. Women come to me and say, I want to lose weight. And I say, you don't want to lose weight. You want to lose body fat. What you really want to do is recomp your body. Those are all reasons why we can get in the ice and utilize it as a tool. And especially with the 11th hour people who have Raynaud's, who a medical doctor would say, don't get in because circulation problems or autoimmune conditions. Quite often they're advised not to be in strong temperature changes. Those people are going to cold because they have nothing else left. And that's why they come to me, maybe, or they come to someone else. And I certainly don't force them to go in, but I am seeing, and we generally seeing, and I'm speaking just for some of the ice coaching community, people with a frequent ice bath practice, mitigating a hell of a lot of symptoms and even totally eradicating symptoms. Whether that's curative or not, I can't speak to. I'm not a medical professional, but cold is a thing, and it's not going to go away, and people have been doing it for thousands of years. It's not some on-trend thing that just arrives. Maybe cryo is newer, right? I mean, things like that, but like an ice bath, cold water immersion, deliberate cold exposure for a minimum effective dose period of time. And then it's incredible. It's changed my life. It's changed many people's health and state of being. It makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel like mood boosted. Andrew Huberman just did another, I was like, whack-a-mole, this is the thing. Just did an episode of his podcast talking more about cold. And of course, I listened 3 times. It's 3 hours long lately. And I'm like, okay, third time through, taking notes. But pulled a study that was cold does all these things neurochemically, bliss chemicals, and pops, norepinephrine and all of that. But what it doesn't do is spike your cortisol. That to me, I'm like, I want to go in the bike 9 times because the thing I have to worry about in my personal life is cortisol. I ride the edge a lot because I'm a busy modern day woman or whatever, right? I mean, whatever the reason is, I'm off caffeine. I'm doing all these things to mitigate cortisol being too high in my body. And knowing that the ice bath is not something that is going to influence that so drastically, I can go in the water and feel good about it, which is that's awesome. A lullaby to my ears.
Yeah. Do you see the cold plunge working better, worse, however you want to describe it, at different times of your cycle?
Yeah, I don't love. Women always ask, when should I not go in? Because why? They're looking for a reason to not go in 35-degree water. And that's everyone, right? Men will stand by the side, big hurly-burly CrossFitters, and then the last question they will ask me, they will look up with their big, strong man bodies, and they will go, it's going to be cold? I'm like, it's going to be cold, dude. Get in the ice.
I already told you, yes.
It's all the anticipation of the ice is worse than ice itself, but it's all beautiful. And we do need to have a tap into our intuition. I do not recommend for females to get in every day. I think men have a better ability and propensity to get in every day and to go hard and all of that. I will also say that specifically and just personally, I did a 34-day ice bath challenge.
I remember seeing that.
And I was doing it, and some days I was like, I'm doing this because I told Instagram I would do this. Is this okay? I announced it, I said it, I do it. It was supposed to be 30 days. By the time day 30 hit, I had enough momentum at that point where people were like, do one more day so I can come over and do it. I was like, oh, but it's fun to do in groups, oxytocin and all of that chemical response, and to see people and coach them through their first time. But the big thing that really happens is that there were days that I was like, I'm just doing this because I'm committed to something. I'm going to see it out. But I don't feel great about it. And it's not that I was dangerous. I was doing 6 minutes a day, sometimes in 2 rounds. I did it for 34 days. And I will also tell you that straight out of that space, my period came 9 days early. a lot of things happen, right?
Wow.
And you
Okay.
say, well, okay, well, you just hit 40, and like maybe that's why, and like, oh, this or that. You could say all the things, but it felt, for someone who's had a completely normal cycle, it felt like it was shifting my hormones in some way,
Mm.
because of using it every day. I do think what I say to women is this: if you love the ice and you want to go in every day and you're a sovereign individual, you get to choose what you do. And also, if you're starting from a place of hormonal dysregulation, or you don't know anything, or you're not even tracking your cycle, maybe you should just be like, I can do the ice bath 3 or 4 times a week. It's
Mhm.
fine. Like
Mhm.
every other day, fine. You got to love the cold to do it that much. If you're away in
Yeah.
like Iceland and you're like, we're gonna go Reykjavik and do like plunges, cool, 3 days in a row, like that's fine. But I don't think every day.
Mhm.
Menopausal women maybe a little bit more ability to do that. Same with fasting. If you're dysregulated and you're perimenopausal, I think ice is not the thing. I think you need to keep your body as baseline where it is as it's changing through this beautiful arc of time. And cold is still great. I
Mhm.
think it's important to say pacemaker, heart conditions, really bad circulation conditions, like you always want to ask your doctor first. And also, cold is a game changer. It really is.
Yeah.
And start with a cold shower if people are afraid.
Yeah.
But the thing about don't go in on your period, it's like maybe you just feel crappy and you don't want to. That's okay. But
Yeah.
there's nothing that's gonna hurt you, that I've seen in all the bodies I've put in. And yeah, like that's the biggest question I get asked: when should I go in? I don't love to go in those 4 or 5 days before my period. I'm very sensitive
Mm.
to temperature, and I'll take a little break. I also I try to take a moment to sit and breathe into how stressful my allostatic load is, my full day of stress. Did I have like someone hollering at me, someone with a challenge, a client issue that came up? Did my mom, someone sit, you get an
Yeah.
announcement, whether it's next traffic, and I just try to gut check. Am I in a space where my allostatic load is so high and I'd be better served to just like get under my red light panel and breathe and be like into
Mhm.
it? Or am I just like having a moment where my stress is, I'm so maxed out and spinning in like limbic loops. I have a thing that says limbic system loops inside my thing. It's like reminding me to not ruminate so much, right? This is like
Mm.
women are more susceptible to like taking these like 4 areas of our thought process, and one of them is rumination, and just ruminating it like crazy.
Totally.
And that's great.
Yeah.
We're considering the whole community in every scenario. And also not great when I'm trying to sleep at 2 a.m. or when my day's been really long. So if my
Yeah.
allostatic load is too high and I could be served by something else, I may make the choice to not go in ice. But many times also, I'm like limbic loops looping, or feeling like I can't let something go and I want to sleep and I want to clear my head. And in that case, the cold actually serves me well, because there is
I'll
no place
agree.
in the
Yeah.
world that you like be here now. You want to be here now? Put yourself in 35, 40-degree water for a few minutes. You'll be there, nowhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Like, I've used it in that description perfectly where it's like, "Get out of your head, Lindsay, and just get in the water." Like
And you're a smarty pants. You're so intelligent, and I feel like you're so cerebral that like cold it's great for that, right? Like I
I think
really,
it's totally
whew,
helped my, mental health a ton,
yeah.
and I mean, even my thermoregulation, because I used to get cold really easily,
Mm.
um, and since I've probably been doing cold plunges at least 4, 5 years now, off and on, like, definitely more in certain chapters, um, but I used to be such a wuss in the cold, like, I didn't even start with cold showers because I couldn't do cold showers. I was like, "I need to go straight." I just know me, I just need to go in the cold bucket, the cold plunge, and I would be like, at first, like, that heavy breather, making noise, "Don't talk to me," sort of thing, but it's gotten so much better over the years,
Oh my God, I would never know that unless you said that story. I would be like, you're just like a champion of it. It's
Oh,
great.
hell no. So what's your minimal effective dose? What do you think that is?
My minimal effective dose. It depends on what I'm doing after. If I'm potentiating a workout, I can't do more than like 5.5, top 6 minutes, because
Mhm.
I will do 5.5 or 6 minutes, 10-minute rewarming period, get on the machine or get under the barbell. And so
Okay.
you want to Mike T. Nelson is like another doctor I've had some conversation with. He's like a researcher as well. It's like you want to get your body, because what we see debatably and discussed and well discoursed and all of this is that there is a strong force potential addition by preempting your workout with cold. Okay,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stories out there as well, testosterone boosting and HGH.
Yeah.
Those things can happen, and metabolism and all of that. But when I'm using cold, I'm using it to potentiate force potential. That's really what I want. So it's like one day I was like, I'm gonna do like 10 minutes, and I was like on the machine, and that's like not safe, right? You're under the bar, it's not safe if you're like still shivering. And so you have to find that sweet spot for training. But when it's a rest or recovery day, it's like I don't even use a clock anymore. 6 minutes is usually what I do, but that's not something I start people with. And
Yeah.
have I
What
done
would you
10,
start
11?
someone
I would say 2 minutes.
with?
Everyone can conquer 2 minutes within reason.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest advice I have for people is the first 30 to 60 seconds. That's where people are like, I got to get out.
Yeah.
First,
Yeah.
I got to get out. And if you just
I'm
wait,
over this, but
if you just wait till this like period that I keep calling it the turnover will happen. If you wait to the turnover, your whole body shifts and it actually becomes easier. No one believes me. So the two pieces of advice I have is like breathe through your nose and wait through the turnover. Two things will happen. Your body will get used to the cold. Everything will get used to the cold. And if you're breathing nasally and calmly, your physiological response will be that it shunts all the blood to the core of your body out of the periphery. You may get a little tingly, but it will get easier. And part of
yeah.
that win is don't just get in up to your chest. You get up to your sports bra and you stop. Because if you get up to your neck and you put your deep neck in, you get mammalian response. It slows your heart rate, it calms your breathing, and it helps the whole process. So I'm always like, someone's kind of, and they're up to their nipples, and I'm like, get into your neck. And they're like, Kristin, I can't even do my chest. And it's like, when you get into your neck and they actually do it, then they go, oh, okay, because you feel it. You feel the turnover happen. And so it's a physiological response. And now that I put so many bodies in the ice, I can like see it. It's like the eyes go, ah. And it's just like,
Cool.
everything's going to be okay. Women have
Yeah.
gone from 40 seconds in being like, I can't do this. Oh my God, I'm white knuckling, to like instantaneously in the 5-second period being like, oh, I probably do like 5 minutes. Like
I
there's
can
just
do
this
this all day.
crazy change. And maybe you see that in birthing children sometimes too. Little nerves, and breathe, reverse engineer the nervous system.
Like in
it.
it. Yeah. That's
Right?
that's
In
so
the
great.
pocket. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the one thing I will also just mention is, it's beautiful to see Joe Rogan and the Jockos and the David Goggins of the world just
Yeah.
have a lot of muscling it through and championing each other into the ice. But like there is a moment, this is the thing that I don't want specifically women to be scared off of. There is a moment that it's like you're just going in the ice for your minimum effective dose. There's no pressure. It's you against you. You get out at
Yeah.
2 minutes. Joe Rogan does 20 minutes. I love him. And also, that's 4 million followers. Like 20
You don't
minutes,
have to.
that is point of diminishing returns. That is like, we love you, and we
Yeah.
that your buddies poked and prodded you because you did a minute the first day, by the way, and then you went back in because you didn't want to seem like you were a wuss or whatever that layer of constant is. And it's like, it also could scare some people off. You don't have to get in and like have a competition with your friends and be like, who's staying in the longest? It's like, what feels good to you without the chicken and the brat, knowing you'll have a turnover. Everyone could do 2 minutes. Maybe you get to 3, and then that's like, just see how it feels, right? And that's the thing, is like, that's the intuitive piece. And that's the like, we are powerful and sensitive piece of women that I really like to bring to the
Yeah.
table. Because we have
Oh,
both.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
All
how can people find you and work with you?
People can find me. Instagram is like the biggest social handle that I do. Warrior Woman Mode at Warrior Woman Mode on Instagram. It's warriorwomanmode.com. I run cold and breath training here in Austin and with athletes, and as well as instructor training. That's under Sherpa Breath and Cold, SHERPA, breathandcold.com. All
Okay.
that info there. And then I have a podcast called Well Power. And so
Awesome.
all of it's like shared through Instagram, which I think is like our modern day, for now, vehicle.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
For now,
For
until
now,
it's not.
until it's not. One day it'll be like
Yeah,
some big pulse and it'll be something new. But for now,
yeah,
that's where they can find me. And I'm so happy to have like had this chat with you, and you're bringing so much
absolutely.
goodness to women and so much insight about how they can take care of their bodies and minds and brains better.
Yes, yes. I do love how, like, you make, I'll say, biohacking approachable for women.
Yeah,
And so I hope that's, the takeaway that people, women, whoever's listening to this podcast will take away and, start to at least integrate a little bit into their life or be like, oh, I'm already biohacking. Cool.
for sure. They're biohacks that men do not really talk about for women. Like there are electrostim devices like Yarlap that are like
Yeah,
intravaginal, and there is the VFit, which is an intravaginal red light therapy device.
so
Like what?
cool. I
So it's
know. We
pretty
could definitely
amazing.
have you back on to talk about all the red light stuff.
All the things. Yeah. I mean, this is a
Yeah,
good start. Let's get women on their apps, tracking day one bleed, aligning their fitness cycles, and working with you guys to recover all the things and make beautiful babies that we get to bring in the world. And
ah,
yeah, feel good
awesome.
about it all.
Awesome. All right, I won't take any more of your time, but this has been a great start, and I have a feeling we'll talk more in the future.
Yeah,
Thanks for
yeah.
making
Indeed.
time for us. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging with me, Lindsay, and inviting me. And I'll see you soon. I'm sure. Sending you love.
Absolutely. Bye, Kristen.
Bye.